Okay, at this point, we can start to now identify as what is considered normal in an ECG. And so what we're going to do now is look at sinus rhythms. When does the heartbeat start from the SA node, the sinoatrial node? So that's why we call them sinus rhythms. So we have our heart. All right. Sometimes we do. Here we go. And we're talking about rhythms that start at the SA node, and that's where they should start. That's where depolarization should begin, and the atria depolarize, and then the rest of the heart will follow. So remember, if we're looking at lead 2 here, where this is negative and this is positive, looking at lead 2, the P wave will be upright because the depolarization is going towards the positive electrode. So we have a positive P wave, or an upright P wave. Now, if we were looking at AVR, in AVR, the right arm is positive. And so in AVR, here's lead 2, in AVR, we should have a negative P wave. All right. Now, these criteria help you to identify that this atrial depolarization, the P wave, probably comes from the SA node. Because if it came from somewhere else, the P waves might not be positive in lead 2, they might not be negative in AVR. Right? So what we're going to look at is, what is a normal sinus rhythm? So to define whether or not it's normal, we just said you're going to look for a positive P wave in lead 2 on the ECG. You're going to look at AVR, and you're going to see, is the P wave negative in AVR? What also do we know about a sinus rhythm? If the SA node is where the depolarization is originating, how fast does the SA node usually fire? Well, your heart rate should probably be between 60 and 100 beats per minute. That would tell us it's probably coming from the SA node. What else have we talked about? Well, when the SA node fires and the depolarization goes to the atria, it will then go to the AV node, bundle hips, bundle branches, into the ventricles, and then you get a QRS complex. So anytime you have a P wave, you should have a QRS complex to follow it. So you have a P wave, it should be followed by a QRS complex. And likewise, this QRS complex that we have here only has one P wave. So a QRS complex should only have one P wave. So this would be a 1-to-1 ratio. One P wave for every QRS complex, one QRS complex for every P wave. Okay. What else do we know about the SA node? Well, when it does fire at 60 to 100 beats per minute, it does so very regularly. So we have what we call a regular rhythm. Basically means the distance between R to R's, the R to R intervals are the same. And the distance between P waves, because that is actually the atrial depolarization, will be the same. And so PQRST, PQRST, PQRST. So if we measure the distance from one P wave to the next, they should all be the same. Likewise, the distance from one R wave to the next should be the same throughout. That's what we call a regular rhythm. These criteria here must exist if we're going to call this a normal sinus rhythm. Now, let's change just one of these criteria. And that criteria being the heart rate. What if the heart rate was less than 60? Or what if it was more? So if the heart rate was greater than 100, this is a tachycardia. Now, if all those other things hold true, all these other criteria hold true, we could call this a sinus tachycardia. We have other types of tachycardia though, but if everything holds true, it may be a sinus tachycardia. The SA node is firing fast. Now, when does the SA node fire fast? Well, during exercise. When you exercise, your heart rate goes above 100, and this is okay. All right? It has a gradual onset. So your heart rate doesn't go from 70 to 150 automatically. It gradually gets there. And that's okay. That's the kind of tachycardia that's okay. However, if you have tachycardia at rest, that is not good, particularly if it's of a sudden onset. So if your heart rate is 70 and then suddenly jumps to 120, especially at rest, that's not good, and it's likely not the SA node, right? So that would not be a sinus rhythm. Now, what about when your heart rate is less than 60? What do we call that? Well, that's called a bradycardia. All right. Now, if at rest your heart rate is less than 60, well, if you're an athlete or very well aerobically trained, that's okay. We expect that. That means you have a very large parasympathetic tone. In other words, your parasympathetic nervous system is slowing down your heart rate. However, if you're having symptoms, particularly if you're not well trained, and that really low heart rate is making you dizzy and lightheaded, things of that nature, that's when it becomes a problem. All right. So these are considered, or could be considered, sinus rhythms. But again, in order for it to be sinus, the P wave should be upright in 2, should be negative in AVR. The rate is generally 60 to 100 at rest. 1 P for every QRS, 1 QRS for every P wave, with a very regular rhythm. And that will give you confidence that these depolarizations are starting from the SA node.